Let's start with a question by Nikki. Let us know if you're having any trouble with your video or audio. But if you'll hit refresh, as the administrator says, I think you'll get what you want. The question is like this. I'm having some philosophical difficulty with some of the real love language around the law of choice and the right to choose. I would rather say that people are created with an ability to choose rather than a right to choose. Some people might prefer freedom to choose, but I have a different understanding of freedom because when we choose what is wrong, we're not truly free, but trapped by getting and protecting behaviors. I'm having trouble wrapping my mind around having a right to choose stealing, lying, murder, etc. Can you say more about the language of right versus ability or some other term? How did you come to decide on the language of the law of choice, and how important is the language? Obviously, it wasn't an accident. The reason I didn't choose ability to choose is because the ability to choose is kind of obvious. It's obvious that I have the ability at any time to punch you in the face. It's obvious that I have the ability to be loving, be ugly, the ability to make choices is pretty clear. We're different in that. We differ from trees and stones, for example, in our ability to choose, and I think everybody gets that. Where people stumble is that we're not so sure that people have the right to choose. So you would agree that I have the ability to punch you in the face. But there are large numbers of people, perhaps even the majority of people, who would say that I don't have the right to punch you in the face. And what is critically important is that we understand that everybody has the right to make any choice that they want to. The instant we go to infringe and control other people's choices before they make them and stop them and control their ability to choose, we not only diminish that person, but essentially make them a non-person. We make them an extension of ourselves. We make them objects that we control. Now, when I say that somebody has the right to murder, what people often hear is that it's okay to murder. Oh no, I'm not saying that, because in conjunction with the law of choice is also the law of responsibility. The law of choice alone would actually look like chaos. So, yeah, I have the right to kill, but I also, according to the law of responsibility, am held responsible for every choice I make. So, I can choose to punch you in the face, but then the law of responsibility says that then there are consequences attendant to the choices that I make. And this is the part that's critical to get. Although I can make any choice that I wish, I do not then have the right to choose the consequences of my decision. Do you see? So, I can choose to punch you in the face, but I do not then have the right to choose that the consequences of that will be that I get to eat chocolate ice cream. Other people will determine the consequences, or other circumstances will determine the consequences of my punching you in the face. And let me tell you, these are immutable laws. Just like, for example, I have the right to choose to jump off a cliff. I can do that anytime I want to. But I then do not have the right to choose that I won't hit the bottom, that I won't fall. So, same in relationships. Do I have a right to choose to be unloving, selfish, angry, spiteful, mean-spirited, unkind? Sure. But then, if I make that choice, do I then have the right to choose to feel happy? No. You cannot make ugly, mean-spirited, unloving choices and then be happy. Consequences simply follow our choices. Sometimes they're imposed on us, but usually they just naturally follow, just like the laws of physics. You jump off a cliff, gravity will pull you to the bottom, and you will hit the bottom of whatever that is. A chasm, a canyon, a river, whatever. And the same is true in our own personal individual lives and in our relationships. You can choose to, for example, insist on being right in an argument with a partner. Go for it. But you cannot then choose to feel loved by that partner, or choose for your partner to feel loved by you, or choose to have a richly fulfilling relationship. Because if you insist on being right, you're choosing to be selfish. You're choosing to look after yourself first. You're choosing to ignore the needs of your partner, and you will reap unhappiness as a result. So I choose the word right to emphasize that you can do whatever you want to. But the law of responsibility then says you do not then have the right to choose the consequences. Hope that helps. Let me know if it doesn't. Now here's a woman that says, it's getting easier for me not to use anger in reaction to anger. But I'm struggling with the temptation to give in order to keep peace. How do I deal with this temptation? You always just remember that everything becomes easier when you just tell the truth about what you're doing. So if I attack you, because you say you're talking about your response to anger, if I become angry at you and you hear I don't love you, and you respond to me with anger, then we have me saying I don't love you and you saying I don't love you, because you're defending yourself. If I come at you with anger and you give in, what are you doing? What is giving in? Giving in is running. You're running from the situation emotionally because you're not really truly facing it. You're lying, because what you're doing is you're giving something up to the person who's attacking you in order to achieve peace. But it's really a lie, isn't it? You're not really giving your partner something that they want because you love them. You're doing it so that you can achieve peace for you. So it's a lying, deceitful manipulation, and it's just another protecting behavior. So you need to always ask yourself, why am I doing this? If you're feeling anxious when somebody attacks you, whatever your response is will be wrong. It will be, because you'll be protecting yourself. So if you're feeling anxious, you may need to say to the person that you're talking to, excuse me, I need a few minutes to think about this. What you have said is very important. Now, this is critical. Don't say to the person, when you're angry, when you're being a horse's butt, I can't talk to you. That's not going to go over well. But you can say, I'm not responding to this well. There's something that I'm caught on, or I need time to think about it. You don't mention them. Nothing they did wrong. I need to go think about it. I'll be back in a minute. And can we talk about it in 30 minutes? Because I want to listen carefully to everything you're saying. You deserve my listening well. And right now, I'm not. So you see, everything you're saying is loving. I want to listen to you better. I'm not listening well now. I want to give you the attention you deserve. Instead of responding in fear, because if you respond in fear, it doesn't matter whether you're running, lying, acting like a victim, attacking. It doesn't matter which of those you're doing. It's still selfish. And your partner will not feel loved. Even if you give in, your partner won't feel loved. Now, your partner might feel a sense of power, but that doesn't contribute to a loving relationship. So you just need to be really honest about why you're doing something. Here's someone who was talking about the law of choice. And she said, so it's very much like the independence speech that I gave my daughter when she left for college. I said, you can choose smart or you can choose stupid. But if you choose stupid, someone or something will make sure that you are unhappy. And she seemed to like that speech. That's brilliant. Now, this is an important thing. After you tell a child that, you can't give them lectures anymore. You have to allow the consequences to teach. So let's say, for example, that she chooses stupid in a given situation. You can't then come in and say, see, See, I told you. You just have to let the consequence teach them. Because they're going to remember, dang it, when I chose stupid, I hated it. They're going to remember that a lot better than if you come in and say, you shouldn't have done that. Because then all they're going to do is attempt to avoid your disapproval. And that's really no greatly fulfilling way to live. So, good speech. Good thing to teach her. And now she'll learn. She'll feel more independent. She'll feel stronger as she makes her choices. You support her, you love her, and she'll learn great. One thing I think you'll notice, the more you apply the principles of real love in various aspects of your lives, is that the more consistently you study them and the more consistently you discuss them with people and apply them, you're going to see that real love applies to everything and everywhere. Marriages, relationships, workplace, classroom, driving on the road, pretty much every situation that you'll ever be in. And that's pretty fulfilling. As one person here already said, you know, it's getting easier and easier for me not to use anger in reaction to anger. And that's really how you tell that real love is making a difference in your life, is that you're getting and protecting behaviors a little bit at a time start to diminish. That's how you tell. So people are looking for some magic thing, like there's some ooh that suddenly there's a ringing of bells or angels singing, and no, it's simpler than that. Something will happen that normally would have set you off, and one day you'll notice, gosh, it really didn't. You just really didn't become upset. So that's when you know that you're getting it. Here's a question that says, can I say that when I feel afraid for any reason, the decision that I make will be imitation love? Pretty much. I mean, even a blind squirrel will occasionally find an acorn, so you might not make a getting and protecting behavior decision. You might not be using imitation love on a given occasion if you're afraid, but the odds are just almost zero. It's pretty simple. You know, sometimes people will say to me, well, how did you know I protected myself? Because they're describing an interaction with a child or a husband or a wife or whoever. And they think I can read their mind. It's not complicated, because as they're describing the situation, they're angry already just with me. And that's describing the situation that happened 2 days ago. So you can only imagine how they were in the situation. If I come at you right now, where you're sitting in your chair, I come in the room and I come at you with a raised knife, what are the odds that you'll be afraid, and what are the odds that you'll protect yourself? It's not like they're going to be high. The odds are going to be 100%. So when we're afraid, we protect ourselves. And the protecting behaviors are uniformly harmful to us and to them. Why? Because every single time that I protect me in any way, what am I doing? You can see it. Just physically, the representation is I'm separating myself from you. If I'm protecting me, how could I possibly be focused on loving you? You just can't do both at the same time. Here's a great question. Does it make sense that you can pick out the person in your life that is the hardest to love and make them a challenge and learn to love them and thereby advance quicker in real love by picking somebody who's harder? Well, that sounds like a cute idea, but in practical application, it doesn't work out that way. Learning real love is very much like becoming physically fit or building muscles. So when you're first learning, you start with repetitions of, say, 5 pounds on the barbell, and so you get good at lifting 5 pounds, and then you go to 10 pounds, and it is simply a fact, a physiologic truth, that the more you strain your muscles gradually, the bigger your muscles become, the stronger they become. And it actually requires them being stressed. If you do nothing but work out with 5 pounds, and you work out with 5 pounds to where you can lift 5 pounds 1,000 times in a row, that will not prepare you to lift 100 pounds. So you have to gradually build up your strength. But the problem is that if you want to get to 100 pounds, you have to do it in increments. So if you've gotten to where you can lift 5 pounds pretty well, and then somebody comes along and dumps 100 pounds on the bar, what will happen is you won't get stronger, you'll be injured. So you can't overdo it. So it sounds like a cute idea. All right, find the hardest person that you know and lift them. It actually will hurt you. And in most cases, it will drain you completely. It will make you feel discouraged, like you don't know anything, and very often will make you go backward. Which is why early on, as people are learning about real love, I actually suggest to people that they avoid the people that are hardest to love, because it's very discouraging. Just absolutely saps them. I get phone calls and emails from people almost daily saying, I had an interaction with whoever, my mother-in-law, my husband, somebody, and it went terrible. I thought I knew something about real love, and now I feel like I know nothing. Wrong. All that happened was you'd worked yourself up from 5 to 10 to 20 to 30 pounds, and then all of a sudden one day along came somebody who was 100 pounds. Now, if you've worked yourself up to 30, that's quite a bit better than 5. And then somebody adds 70 more pounds to the bar, and you can't lift it. Does that mean you have made no progress? No, all you've done is that 70 pounds has identified what you can't lift. That's all. You have not gone backward. People are all the time telling me, I took a step backward. No, you didn't. All that happened is that somebody came along who helped you identify you can't lift that much. That's all. And so I suggest you actually stay away from people like that. It's too much, it's too discouraging, it's too harmful. So lighten up, practice, gradually you'll get stronger. Way healthier way to do it. Another question. In one of our arguments a few months ago, I blew up at my husband. At one point he said, so what you're saying is that you're going to spend the next 30 years making me pay for the last 30. And I said, basically, yes. I think we've all done something like that at some point. If we haven't said yes out loud, we've thought it. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. So she said basically yes, and then in parentheses, ouch. I'd like to open up a conversation and say that I don't feel like I need to hold on to that anymore. So how do I say that in a real love way? So what you do is you sit down with him and you say, keep it very simple, and you don't need to use real love language at all. So I'll be you, and you be your husband. And I would just sit down with you and I would say, sweetie, for the last, I guess you've been married 30 years. For the last 30 years, all you've ever wanted from me was for me to love you, really love you unconditionally, where I loved you no matter what you did, because that's the only kind of love that counts. And frankly, I've been an idiot. I've loved you. Actually, it's not even love, because really unconditional love is the only thing that counts as love. But I've given you my approval only when you do what I've wanted. And when you haven't done what I've wanted, then I've been annoyed and impatient and exasperated and irritated at you and communicated with you in 100 different ways, rolling eyes, tone of voice, that I don't love you. And that's been the meanest thing that's the meanest thing anybody can do in a relationship. I can only imagine how painful that's been for you. And I can't tell you that I'm going to quit that overnight because I'm too stupid. But I can tell you that I'm committed to learning how to love you better. That's all I got. So I'm going to try. If you, now stop, I'm not you anymore. If you say that, you don't need to address that conversation you had about paying him back for 30 years. All he cares about is the love, you see? You address that, he will be listening to you intently. When you say, I've been an idiot, people tend to listen very well. So give that a shot, and then periodically ask him if he's noticing a difference. Because tell him you really want to do better. This isn't some thing that you're doing to look good. You really want to love him better. And you practice talking about your mistakes with people in group. You do whatever it takes. You come here to the video chat. You talk about it here. I mean, this is just essentially an online national group. And you practice telling the truth about yourself with them and then with him. You do that, and he's not going to care about how you've been an idiot in the past. He only wants to know, are you going to learn to love him now? That's all anybody cares about. Will you love him? Once he gets a sense of that, the past is over. I mean, if you've been malnourished and haven't eaten for years, and you have a stomach full right now, the past is done. Especially if you know there's a prospect of your being able to eat steadily in the future. So let me know if that helps you. So here's a lady, because we were talking about the man who asked the question, should I seek out the hardest person on the planet to love as an exercise in loving? No. And she's saying, so what if you're what if you're already married to somebody who's the hardest person to love? And you know, many of us are, which is why I tell people that your first experiences in telling the truth about yourself should be with people who are, often should be with people who are not your spouse. Now, let me emphasize that there are two different reasons to tell the truth about yourself as an adult. As an adult, you tell the truth about yourself. First reason is so that you can create opportunities to feel unconditionally loved. And that's what you do here. It's what you do here in the video chat. It's what you do in the chat rooms, which, by the way, you need to go to the chat room schedule. And there are 6 hours a week now where you can go and you can chat with trained real love professionals, and you can get experience with telling the truth about yourself there. You can tell the truth about yourself in groups, on the phone, in person with people, one-on-one. There are a million opportunities or different ways that you can tell the truth. So you tell the truth about yourself to create opportunities for wise men and women to love you. The other reason to tell the truth about yourself is simply to tell the truth about yourself to eliminate or to reduce or create the opportunity to reduce the pain in someone else's life. So, let's say that you're married to a hateful spouse. This lady who's asking this question is married to a hateful spouse. You don't go tell him the truth about yourself so that he will love you, because at this point there is zero chance he can do that. He doesn't know how. You're telling him the truth about yourself simply to start removing the layers of confusion and pain that have been killing him for all the years you've been married. Now, has he hurt you? Yes, but all we can talk about here is what you can do to eliminate the pain that you have created in his life. So that's the reason that you're going to be telling him the truth. Here are the mistakes that I've made. So you're going to tell him the truth about yourself. You're going to, other than that, you're going to mostly limit your contacts with him, because you don't want to have any expressions, you don't want to have any interactions with him that are the least bit unloving. In fact, I tell people when they're first learning about real love, if you're married to somebody who's hard to love, you're going to probably for a while end up speaking to them very little. I recommend, in fact, in the very beginning, I often tell people, now it's a little different with this particular lady, there are other circumstances, but I often tell many people to tell you, go home and tell your spouse, look, I've screwed it up, I'm going to learn how to love you, but for a while, maybe for a month or so, I may not be speaking to you at all. None. And the reason for that is I've been so stupid for so long and have been in such a habit of saying demanding, controlling, hurtful, attacking, victim-y, defensive things to you that I don't now know another way to speak. And so for a month or so, I need to simply detach from speaking at all so that I can learn to speak to you differently. If the only way you know how to speak to a spouse is defensively, it's way better to speak none for a while than it is to try to speak to them and inflict more wounds. One of my favorite phrases in talking to couples is, no more wounds. You already know how to hurt each other. You don't need to practice doing that anymore. So for a while, you may not speak to your spouse at all, other than to say, I'm going to the store, I'm going to have the car, or the kids need to be picked up, or just mundane details. And then gradually, as you become more loving, you have more and more interactions. But you have to remember that the changes that take place have to take place in you. You don't expect them to take place in your spouse. Now, I was just talking to the lady and suggesting that she go home and say to her husband, I've been an idiot, I have not loved you. And she says, that would be hard stuff for me to say. The only reason that it's ever hard to say is that we're afraid that it makes us look wrong. And all of our lives, we've been told that being wrong is not acceptable. If we're wrong, people will love us less. And it's a lie. Now, they'll love us conditionally less, but that's not love. It's garbage. So think of it this way. If you're wrong, people will feed you less garbage to eat. Yeah, so what? Hardly a loss. But if you're wrong and you tell your husband you're wrong, you create the opportunities for unconditional love. Pretty much you've already proved the other way doesn't work. And this way really does. So minimal risk here. And part of the reason it bothers you too is that, when you picture yourself saying to him, I was wrong, I was an idiot, part of you wants to say, well, so was he. I know, but that's irrelevant because you don't have a right to speak for him. And we don't have a right to speak for anybody. I can only change me. And if I'll focus on that, miracles become possible. As soon as I focus on what you ought to do, I'm dead. It's over. Okay, here's somebody who's saying, when I was talking to the woman about going home and telling her husband that she has been wrong and that she has not been loving, the question here is, would you suggest practicing telling someone else, like a wise person, that you're wrong before telling your husband? Yes, I didn't think of that, thank you. And the reason for it is this. If all we've done is defend ourselves for a lifetime, it becomes an unnoticeable habit to us. We really don't notice that we do it. And we defend ourselves almost with every breath we take. I've done this a number of occasions, but one time I just had a fascinating experience with a lady who was writing a letter to her sister who had mistreated her for, long time, decades. And she was writing a letter in which she was going to describe her mistakes and apologize. And I said, and so we went through what she was going to say, and I said, just for kicks, before you send your sister the letter, why don't you email it to me and let me look at it? And she said, well, okay. So she sent me the letter, and she said, boy, I'm glad you asked me to send it to you first, because it forced me to eliminate all the blaming that I would have done. Well, hysterically, I don't think there were 5 words put together without blaming in that entire letter. It was, probably 2 pages. And it was one blame after another. There had to have been 40 attacks in those 2 pages. She just went at her sister with tooth and claw. I have no idea what it was like before she took the blaming out. She cut her sister up into little pieces. And she didn't see it. So it is a good idea to practice with somebody who would help us recognize our blaming before you go do it with your husband, because, boy, it's awful to go to somebody and say, from now on I want to practice not blaming you, and then for the next 5 minutes blame them because they don't take that very well. We have a question here that was written to me and sent to me before. So I want to read the question, and then we'll answer it, and just because it's kind of long. This is a man who has a child who's 2.5, and the child is with him half the time. Child's name is, I'll just use the child's name, and then you can just kill me later. Child's name is Connor. And when we're together, we try to work on choices and consequences. But I don't know if I'm doing this right. So an example. At preschool, they have all the kids, including Connor, use the potty almost every hour. Can you imagine what that looks like? Kind of makes me chuckle. A little line of kids going to the potty every hour. And like all the other kids, he uses the potty without any problems. At home, I don't stick to every hour like clockwork, but when it is potty time, I say, let's go potty. Then he gets defiant and says no and starts to cry and turns it into a tantrum. First I talk to him about, well, the sooner that you go, then the sooner he can do this or do that or X, Y, or Z, and then I give him choices. Connor, you have 2 choices. They're always the same. Your choice is you can use the potty or you can have a timeout. I'm going to count to 3 and you need to make your choice. 75% of the time he chooses the timeout and doesn't go to the potty. So then I put him in timeout for a short time. He doesn't like it, and then he tries to run away. I remind him that he chose the timeout and that I wish that he would choose the potty so that he or we could do the other activities that we were going to do, X, Y, or Z. He will then take off his pants and maybe pull his diaper up, but he says, no, I don't want to go potty. And then sometimes I ask him if he wants to go in the big potty, and he says, no. Can you see the drama and all this? So then I remind him of his choices, and I start to count, and then it's just a struggle, this whole thing. So he says, do I approach this correctly? I don't get mad, but still, that's a mess. So let's look at what you're doing, because teaching with consequences is really important. Hang on, let me make a... First, you use time out as a consequence. If he doesn't go potty, then you have him sit on a stool. Now, we use the term, or sit on a stool, or sit in a corner, whatever your timeout is. We use the term consequences too freely without remembering what the purpose of consequences are and what their nature is. So, the purpose of a consequence is to make the wrong choice sufficiently inconvenient that the child, or maybe sometimes an adult, will be motivated to make the right choice. So a timeout is a little inconvenient, but not very. Really, it isn't. Going to the potty, timeout. Frankly, going to a potty is more inconvenient. Do you see that? It has to be more inconvenient than the right choice. The consequence does. A timeout isn't very inconvenient. So it fails as a consequence already in just one respect. And you want their behavior to become self-motivating. So the consequence and the wrong choice have to be related to each other. So it forms some kind of association in the child's mind. So that the next time he goes to do the wrong thing, he remembers the consequence. So it's like a natural flow. When I go to do this wrong thing, oh yeah, that happens. And, you know, timeout doesn't really have a whole lot to do with urinating, does it? Let's see, if I don't urinate, I'll have to sit on a stool. That just doesn't make very much sense. I mean, you might as well say, if you don't go to the bathroom, you have to eat broccoli. It just doesn't form a natural association in the kid's mind. So it's not inconvenient enough. It's not naturally related to the task that he's being asked to do. And then you're demanding, so because they're not related, the only reason he's having to do the task is to please you. And that's always a sucky reason to have to do any task. So they've got to be related. Like if a child breaks a window, he's got to fix it or pay for it. And we'll give you some examples of related here in a minute. Then let's consider the whole process. Why are you requiring him to go? You know, you're just periodically saying you have to go potty. Well, think about this from the kid's perspective. He's sitting there playing with blocks or whatever it is, and suddenly you say, okay, you have to go potty. The kid must think you're insane. Why do I have to go? Are you nuts? I mean, he doesn't feel like he has to go. So do you see how absolutely arbitrary this is? His bladder hasn't filled up enough yet. Now you say, at school, he complies. Well, of course he complies. There are 25 other kids who all go at the same time. He wouldn't dare not go. So he actually has some sort of positive little peer pressure going here to make him go. At home, he doesn't have that. And he's going, are you just like nuts? What possesses you periodically to make me go potty? It doesn't make sense to him. So you're asking him to do kind of like a nutty thing. You might as well just tell him periodically to stand on his head. So let him go when he needs to go. Because isn't that kind of what we do as adults? I mean, he doesn't ever see anybody say to you, okay, it's time to go potty. It doesn't make sense. Now, so once again, he's pleasing you. It comes down and it's all about making you happy. And that is not a way to make a kid happy. The instant a kid senses that he's being controlled and told to do something just to make you happy, the kid will fight you. Because children, it's like they have that little inside meter that senses when the law of choice is being violated, and they will fight you about it. So, what can you do? Let's look at the process before we get to the consequences. The kid is 2.5. He's proven he can hold it and that he can pee on demand. But he's wearing diapers. That doesn't make sense. Why is he wearing diapers? Because it's easy. Because he's lazy. He can get away with it. He can just sit there and pee his diapers and you'll take care of it. So, time to grow up. One of the possibilities is that you take his diapers off permanently. And you say, I'm going to let you go when you want to go. Do whatever you want. The diapers are done. You're a big boy now. Yippee! I'm not going to change your diapers ever again. Isn't that the goal of the whole thing? We go through all this potty training. The goal is for them to be independent, yeah? He's already proven he's capable of it. So move on. Take the diapers off. Give him regular pants and say, you're a big boy. Now, consequences. What if he pees his pants? What if he's sitting there playing and now he can feel that he needs to go? None of this arbitrary go potty thing. He can feel that he needs to go and he decides not to, and then, oh, oops, he pees his pants. Well, nobody gets excited. You talk about the consequences ahead of time. What would be a really natural consequence for a child who pees his pants when he knows that when he is capable of controlling it? Simple. He cleans it up. He has to go into the laundry room and take off his pants and his underpants and put them in the laundry and put in soap and start the cycle and clean them or wash them out by hand. They really love washing out urine-soaked pants by hand. You make it really inconvenient. It takes a lot of time, and the kid discovers the next time he goes to pee his pants, he says, let's see, if I pee these, I'm going to have to clean them with my hands, and then there's the soap, and then I'm going to have to hang them up to dry. I think I'll go pee instead of having to go through all that. I'm not kidding. Ours learned to do that when they were 2. They decided it would be easier than having to change their own clothes. So, pretty simple. I've taken parents through this process with kids who had been wetting their beds up to age 14. And I say to the parents, well, what do you do when they wet their beds? I change their sheets. Excuse me? The kid's 14 and you're changing his sheets? Uh-huh. Well, just have the kid change his own sheets. No yelling, no frustration. You just say, oh, you'll be in charge of that. You know what happens? In the middle of the night, this kid's unconscious says, you don't want to have to change your sheets and put it through the washer in the morning. Get up and go to the bathroom. And the kid does. Consequences are delightful teachers because consequences don't get mad at kids. They don't control kids. There's nothing to fight against for the kid. It's a natural consequence. And the kid decides, am I going to pay the price or not? Now, sometimes you do have to tell a child to go. Like, let's say you want to go on a car ride, and you don't really want the kid to pee his pants in the car. So you say, you really do need to go before we go in the car because I don't want to have to pull over to a gas station 5 minutes after we get going. And he says, oh, I don't want to go. And you say, well, okay. So you go, now you have lots of choices. You can take him into the bathroom and you can just sit there and read a book until he decides to go. You don't get excited. You just sit there and wait till he does it. You could remind him that he's going to have to clean up after himself and take a pair of extra change of clothes in the car. And then when he says, oh, I have to go, 2 minutes after you leave the house, and you say, it's from a film called, what's the name of that film? Ben, Steve Martin, Michael Caine. Anyway, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Steve Martin is sitting there at the dinner table and he's playing a retarded kid. And anyway, it's a scam they're pulling. And he says to Michael Caine, he says, can I go to the bathroom? And Michael Caine says, sure. And so he's sitting there at the dinner table with this really, beautifully dressed woman, and Steve Martin goes, thank you. So he just goes in his pants at the table. And that's what you tell the kid. You say, if you don't want to go before we go, then you'll have to go in the car. And then you'll have to change your clothes in the car. So you may give the kid a towel to sit on, whatever. The kid learns that the price of making a stupid decision is inconvenience. It's the price we all pay, right? I mean, cops don't come up to your car when you speed and give you and jump up and down and scream and yell at you. They just hand you a ticket because they realize that if you're inconvenienced enough, you'll quit it. That's how we need to teach our kids instead of having the little fits that we do. You could also carry a clear plastic bottle in the car with you and say, here you go. There's all kinds of choices to make. But you teach the child that you will not be inconvenienced by his bad decisions. He will be inconvenienced by his bad decisions. And if he wants to carry a clear plastic bottle filled with urine into the shopping mall when you get there, then that would be up to him. All kinds of choices that you can make. I'm not advocating any particular one of them. I'm just saying here are some of the different choices. And do they work? Here's somebody who says, in regard to potty training, sometimes it's just physiological, or is it developmental, not a discipline issue? Oh, every once in a while there is a kid who has a genuine physiological reason why they can't hold it during the night or during the day. The percentage of those kids is tiny. And so what I'm suggesting to you is, what you do is you go through this natural process. You have nothing to lose. You say, if you pee your pants, you'll just clean it up. Notice, there's no shaming to it. Just like in our house, I mean, to this day, my grandkids were just here for a couple of weeks. And, you know, one of the kids knocks a glass and spills water all over the floor. Nobody gets excited. The rags are over at the sink, and you just clean it up. What do I care? Just clean it up. And if you do that, and the child still wets his bed when he's 8, then, you know, maybe you need to see a pediatrician or urologist. But I tell you, most of those kids turn out to have a psychological cause for peeing the bed. Most, like 90+%, no joke. And there are occasional physiologic causes, but they are rare. Here's somebody who says, on a practical note, I've noticed that I'm able to be far more loving and patient with my husband and son when I'm taking care of myself and not overscheduling. Brilliant. I really need to focus on making more responsible self-care choices so that I can be more relaxed and loving with my family. I tell you, you can almost quantify real love. No kidding. It's almost like having a bucket. I've used that example many times. You know, you have this much love in your bucket, and if somebody comes in and they snap at you, your bucket lowers. And then, you know, during the day, you make a real love phone call, or you meditate, you get a little love from God, the universe, whatever, your bucket fills back up. Somebody snaps at you. You can handle that kind of draining and filling up all day long. But then this happens. You wake up in the morning and you're sick. You drain. And then you overschedule yourself. And so you're feeling frustrated and tired. And then somebody snaps at you. And then one more person snaps at you. And you're out. So every little thing has an effect on how much real love you have and how able you are to share it with other people. So anything that you can do to either increase the love in your bucket or to decrease the drainage of it will make a great big difference to you. And that's brilliant of you to notice that. Jill says, I'm trying to teach my kids to tell the truth. However, many times it comes across like criticism. Any suggestion? Oh, it's all about your attitude. So if you were raised being criticized and judged and not being loved, of course you do the same thing to your kids. So picture this. Every time you make a mistake and I find out about it, I come up to you and I slap you on the side of the head. So you're working on an assembly line or whatever, and you make a little mistake, and I come up to you and I say, Jill, did you make any mistakes today? And you say, I made 3. And I slap you 3 times. And I do that every time I catch you making a mistake. And then one day I say, oh, and so naturally, what do? You start hiding your mistakes. Duh. So at the end of the day, I come to you and I say, Jill, did you make any mistakes? Well, what are you going to do? You're naturally going to go, no, because who likes to get slapped? So you're going to lie to me, you're going to hide them, you're going to maybe be a perfectionist and try not to make mistakes, but how long can we keep that up? And then one day I come to you and I say, Jill, my sweet, I'm not going to be hitting people anymore. What we're going to do from now on here in the workplace is we're going to do nothing but tell the truth, always the truth, and no one will be punished. Well, let's see. I've already slapped you several hundred times, So after I give you this little speech about the importance of truth-telling, then I come up to you at the end of that very first day and I say, Jill, did you make any mistakes? What are the odds you're going to trust me? Come on. You'd almost be a moron to trust me. I have such a long history of hitting you. And so you're going to hide it from me for a few times. So in the beginning, your girls are not going to trust you. And you really need to kind of laugh at yourself. No kidding. You need to say to them, it's really important to learn to tell the truth. Why? You need to give them why. You need to tell the truth so you can feel loved. Because the instant you lie, you make it impossible to feel seen. You can't feel loved by me. Now, the only reason you lie, this is you talking to them, the only reason you lie is because of me. I'm the one that taught you to lie because I disapproved of you every time you told the truth when you made a mistake. So I get it that you would lie. So all I can tell you is we'll see how it goes. Bit by bit, we'll practice, okay? And we'll see if I become trustworthy. So what I suggest you do is you go out of your way to look for mistakes that they make and point them out. And then teach them what they could do differently. Teach them what you've learned about similar mistakes. And then show no sign of disapproval. Now, you can't fake that. That means you have to go into discussions like that feeling loved. But if you can go into discussions like that feeling loved and not disapprove of them, and they can see, now remember, they've had now hundreds of times in a row of you being disapproving. So in order for them to come to trust you, you're going to have to string together more than two where you're not disapproving. So be patient. Look for their mistakes. Discuss with them alternative choices. Say, gosh, that's the same kind of mistake I made, and oh, did it cause me a lot of trouble? Or point out a mistake and say, what did you learn from that? Very instructive as they see you loving them while they're wrong. There's no substitute for that. You could lecture them forever. The biggest obstacle in my children's lives has been that for the early part of the time, first several years when I was learning these principles, I was teaching them the principles while not living them. That's a real problem. Here, let me tell you about the principles of real love while I shove them down your throat. Not a very attractive way to teach. Here's a question. Woman says, I thought, a woman I thought was my friend betrayed me. Over Christmas, I sent her the manuals for a piece of equipment that I had given her before. She took that as an opening to come back into my life. I didn't want her there. I want to yell at her and tell her how awful she is. But I also want to be loving. But I'm afraid she won't get the point and will keep intruding on my life. So you're only obligated to be as loving as you can. And when I say obligated, I only mean it's a self-obligation. Nobody gets to obligate you. But we're all obligated. It's a universal, divinely imposed obligation that we should practice being as loving as possible. That's all. And the obligation really is only for our good. It's to make us happy. It's not to please anyone. So your goal is to become as loving toward people as you possibly can. And if you have this, like you said here, I want to yell at her and tell her how awful she is, it's pretty obvious you're not in a place where you're able to love someone like that yet. So to let her back into your life at this point, no real reason to. Wait until you're more loving. And you don't ever need to feel trapped by somebody intruding on you. So, for example, she calls and says, gee, would you like to whatever? You know, I guess I'm just not, I'm not ready to do that yet. Or I'm not willing to do that today. Or I don't feel like it. Or you don't need to be ugly. You don't need to say, I don't go out to lunch with backstabbing witches. That's probably not a great approach. But you can say, I would just prefer not to. When you prefer not to enough times in a row, she'll eventually get the message. But you are loving does not mean you always have to do the perfectly loving thing. It means that you do the next loving thing that you are capable of doing, not against a perfect standard. Wow, it's the end of the hour. I can't believe it. Delightful questions. Absolutely had a wonderful time. The room's been filled with people, and we've gone an hour and before I even looked up. So please, when you come back next time, got a comment here from the man who was talking about the timeouts with his child. I got to tell you, this dad is wonderful. I mean, he says, I really didn't see the timeouts as controlling, but they are. The consequences actually sound fun from my point of view because he will actually be causing them. Yes! And see, that's what he's got to get, is that these consequences are something he brings on himself. Whereas a timeout doesn't look like something he brings on himself. And at the same time, he's growing with his own independent responsibility. Got a hi here from Susie and Roy and Mary. Just delighted to have you guys here. These chats are just getting funner all the time. So again, you guys come back and bring your questions with you. Drag your friends with you. This just gets more fun all the time. And we look forward to seeing you. Remember that it's always about real love, and we love you guys a lot. Good night.